get started with ADO right now. Now ADO is nothing but active data objects, right? Basically, ADO is a set of libraries which are in embedded in .NET, mainly used to do some communication with the data sources, right? So basically, for communication with the data source using some drivers or providers, we use ADO.NET, right? And whenever we say data source, it can be your database, right, or an XML or anything. So we can actually use the ADO objects, so which is an active data objects which we have. And why do we call ADO.NET? Because ADO is one of the library set which is a part of .NET, right? Same way when we talk ASP.NET, which means ASP is something which are like the web libraries which you have in .NET framework. So they are all like subset of .NET frameworks, right? So we'll actually see where exactly this comes. So before actually moving into different namespaces or classes which we have, so let's first see where are we now, like in which application part or which tier level part we are in towards learning. So if you take an application, right, so in application you will have two different divisions in it. So first will be your UI, which is a user interface, right, and the second part will be storage, right? So you will actually get only these two at the max. User interface, when I say user interface, it can be through web services and a direct UI connected to anything. I mean, it covers everything as such, taken that way. And the storage is something where you're actually using some medium to store some data, right? So when we talk about UI, so two things get into mind, which is you can have UI programming in two different ways, which is a CUI programming and you can have a GUI, right? So CUI is a console user interface, right, where all the commands, right, whatever you want to run it and print it or save it, right, or provide input, everything you provide through a console window, right? And GUI is a graphical user interface, which means all the commands, right, press enter to exit. I mean, whatever we do, whatever our console windows try to accept, right, all the commands are inbuilt as a graphical component. So that is a GUI interface. Now you can see this is my Notepad++, which you can see, where you can see my save option is just a just an image being created. So when I click on it, right, it will be saved, right? Which means, so all the commands are actually built as a graphical images or some graphics where I can actually easily understand and just use a component to do some action. But in CUI, you have to remember each and everything. If you want to save, you have to remember the command. If you want to print, you have to remember the command as such. So that is your UI base, which is CUI programming and GUI programming. So when it comes to storage, right, we have two different types of storages which you can have. One is file storage, right, and the other one is database, right? We can actually maintain storage in these two. I mean, when I say these two are the high level things which you have, like files and databases. When I say files, it can be flat files, it can be TXT files, right? It can be XML files, right? It can be encrypted files, it can be buffer files, anything. And when I say database, it can be Oracle database, SQL database, Sybase database, DB2, right? Any database as such you are looking. These two can be storage parts. Now, your UI and storage will actually make you an application, right? So we are here over here. So which is we have already seen the CEO part how to build an application. Mainly, we have understood all the pillars of C#.NET, right? Now we are moving towards databases, right, where we can see how to work or how to communicate with database using our ADF.NET. Right? So this is where we are in the life cycle of application. Right? Now, the main namespaces which we have in ADF.NET is system.data. So all our ADO objects which are active data objects, right, we find under system.data namespace. Now this is a main namespace which we have, and this actually covers all different combination of your communication databases here. Now when I say all required combination, which means your application will be running in, let's say, Windows machine, right? And you want to communicate with, let's say, SQL server on Windows machine. It's a straightforward combination, let's say. Or so let's say your some other application is running on Windows machine, right? And it want to talk to Oracle database, let's say in Linux box, right? You can see different combinations again here. And let's say as our application, .NET application is more, biased towards Windows, right? So I'm taking application part as Windows itself, right? And here you can say, let's say it is in DB2 on some other, let's say, platform, right? So it matters that which database you are trying to connect and what is the environment it is hosted on, right? So all these combinations we can actually achieve the current database using the different libraries or drivers or providers which are under system.data. Right? So in here we have some other namespaces under system.data, child namespaces we can also call. The first one you can consider it as SQL client. Right? So this is a namespace under which you let all the classes which are used to connect and communicate with SQL. Right? Same way, not to word with Oracle client, you have your system.data Oracle client. So you have a specific line for communicating Oracle database to, right? Your provider, Oracle client, have provided different classes using which you can talk with your Oracle database. Same way, for as a generic, you have something called system.data.oldb. Now OLDB is your OLDB is like connecting your local OLDB component which are configured, and from your Windows machine you can actually connect to some data source using the OLDB components, right? Which means here our ADOs will be triggering the local OLDB, and that OLDB will be connected to any type of database, right? But this is something which is dependent on the local configuration, right? And then we also have ODBC. So we have these namespaces, right, across which are under system.data. Across all which will be used to connect to different databases and such. The pattern, how you connect, how you manage, and everything will be common across, right? The way or the pattern you work, right, will be common across different things, right? So these are the namespaces or the different internal .NET embedded data or with classes, class namespaces which we have to communicate, right? So When we talk about layer applications, right? So we will have many layer applications in market as such. So if you look into 2-tier and 3-tier application, let's say you have 2 and 3-tier application, let's say. Let's see what exactly, how exactly we do the communication here. So in 2-tier application, let's say you have an application, right? Let me take simulation section. Okay, so here when we take 1-tier application, so let's say you have an application, right? And this is one layer, and let's say you have a database, right? And your application is connected to database to communicate, right? So this may be communicating, let's say this is some SQL server, Microsoft SQL server you have, right? And here you have an application of .NET, right? And it's communicating. So first tier is your application layer, and the immediate layer is your database layer. So this is something where you're actually connected to, you're actually working on an application which works on 2 different layers, right? And your application is directly accessible from the host you're running. There are no proxies or any other service, right? So when we will come to proxy, how to set up a proxy, this is something which is important on hosting, right? So when we actually start learning on IIS, right, I'll actually let you know how to deploy, and very importantly, we'll see how to create a proxy server, right, to redirect to the main app server, right? So for the security purposes, we have many things, like we create switch, load balancers, and different proxies, different rerouting to the main application, right, and some authentications and all. We'll actually see. We'll actually look into that. So here, this is something which is communicating in 2 tiers. Same way, you can have 3 tiers where, let's say you have map, application layer, and you have database layer. So in between, let's say you have some middle layer. Now this is something which is talking to the database, right? And the communication of your app is being done with layer, let's say, right? So this is something, let's say, which is a middleware, which can be a web service or a business logic or app server or anything, right? Where, let's say, this is the main component which is connected to database. So this will have, let's say if it is connected to SQL server, it will have a SQL client, it will be using a SQL client driver, and it will be communicating. And based on the request, whatever app is asking for, it will actually talk to database and give back whatever it is. So this is something which are tail applications which you have. Now you can see at any point on, right, you may have to connect to database, and this is what we have here. Right. So let's go ahead and see the main steps which we'll be using to actually connect to database, right, or communicate to database as such. Right. So let's divide this into 2 different layers. So it can be actually divided into 2 different layers. The first layer is your driver manager layer, right, and the second one is an application layer. So we'll see what are the different steps we have in each of the layers. So when I say driver manager layer, right, which means that each and every database will have its own class library in our ADO to connect to, right? I can't use SQL client to connect to Oracle database, right? Which means it's very important to select the driver, right, to connect to the right database. So in this layer, we have one step called load driver, right? So this is the step which you follow. Now, how to load driver? We don't have to actually, create any a third-party component and add and reference it and then run. We already have SQL client. Say when you import or do using SQL client, right? That is something where you have already loaded your driver to your class, and which is ready to communicate to SQL client, which is your SQL server. That is your loading a driver. This is the first step we do, which is under your driver manager. And then the second step will actually come up from your application. The second step is, guys, this is very important because this is something radio which is going to be common across .NET, using which you are going to communicate with databases. As we'll see the entity framework on the next one, where you don't have to use any of that, but it internally uses. But these are like a foundation, steps we have. So once you are ready with driver, right, which means your database is ready and your host, your machine from where you want to connect to database is ready. So the next step will be connection, like get connection, which means try to connect to the database, right? That is your connection. So once your connection is ready, then you are going to, let's say, create a query. So whatever you want to query in database, keep it ready. Keep your SQL ready. And the fourth one is execute. Right. Once you execute, you will get a result, right? So fifth step will be process results. And the sixth step, or I would say the common step across all, is to handle exceptions. Right? So these are the steps which you have to communicate to database, and these are the common steps which we have. Right? So to actually communicate to database as such. So here, if you go into details of it, right, we'll actually be taking one database, which is our SQL server, right, and we'll create few tables. I'll show you even that, how to create a table, right, how to create a database, how to create a node on it, and all, right, and then we'll actually go ahead with creating different, actually using this, right, so that you can actually you can write a simple program to connect to database and get it. Right now. So here we have a few differences which we have to know, right, on what exactly and how exactly communication happens. So here, from any combination to any other combination, right, you can actually use radio libraries to connect. Right? From any type of application, it can be web, Windows, or Android application, any type of application, you can use all these libraries to connect to any specific database you want. Right? And across all, few classes are important to understand. The first class is connection class. So this class will be common across different drivers. Right? Now this connection is used to connect to database. When I say get connection, so this is a class which we are going to use to connect to database. And then you have command. Now command is something which takes your SQL query. Now we can't directly write a string which is a SQL query and directly execute, right? Obviously no. You can write a query and you need some class where you can actually provide that and then call your execute method of that class. So that is something which is your command. Now these two will connect and you have the command, and command will run and you will get a result. And what are different things or different entities you have to hold a result, right? Once you execute your query on database, right, it will definitely give you some output, right? Now how can I hold? Now there are three different classes again to hold. You have a data reader, right, and you have a data adapter, and you have data set. Right? So inside data set you have data tables, data rows, and all. You will see that. Right? So these are the classes which are very important classes which we will be using across to actually complete the communication with database from .NET. Right? So this is how and these are the classes, a common class, so which you can actually use to work. Okay? Now, so before actually going into the program, let's see how to create database, how to create a simple table, and then we'll move on to database. We'll move on to the sample program to talk to database. So I have SQL Server database installed in my machine, so which is SQL Server 2012. Now this is my database node, right? Now this is a SQL Server node which I have in my machine. Right? Understand it clearly that your databases, SQL Server databases, will be hosted or should be there on a server. If you don't have a server installed, SQL Server installed, you can't create database. You can create multiple databases in one server. Right? That is a combination. So let's go to, there are so many folders in it. Right? Let's go to database folder here. Now you can see I have already a few databases which are already created over here, right? So as per our requirement, let's say we want to create a new database, so you can create that. So for that, you can right click on databases, and you have an option of new database on that. Right, so here you can see, it opens a window where you can provide your database name and all. Let's say I want database school. Right, a simple database where I will be creating multiple tables and transactions. Right. You can give database name and click on OK. Right, you can see your database will get created. And for your database, whatever object SQL Server provides, right, will have different folders in it. All the type of folders you get there. So in which, first let's see the tables part. Now this is the tables which where you can actually create all your tables. And there are many other folders like synonyms. You can create synonyms for as connected to tables. You can have a programmability where you can write your functions, right? Your SPs and everything. You have your security to provide user authentication, logins and all. Right? So here let's concentrate on tables. So let me create a simple table. Now table is an entity where your data will be stored, right? And this table will have columns, and once you start dumping data in it, it will contain rows. So here, let's see how to create a table and how to create a column, or how to create columns in it. So first, let's say I have roll number. So roll number is my first column. This is a column name, and here you can actually mention which data type you want. Now we have many data types as such, right? So let's say I want some integer type. I'm going to take it. Right? So this is my roll number, and then let's say I'm taking student name is my second column, where let's say I'm going to take varchar 50, something like varchar, right? And here you have allow nulls. Now this column is for whether you want to allow, if I don't say this particular column, and if I don't provide any data, will you accept? Let's say roll number I don't accept as null, and student name I don't accept it as null, let's say. Right? The same way, let's say student, you have roll number, you have, let's say what is student name? Let's say email. Let's say that or something, and let's say I don't want to allow this, and let's say student, let's say parent name, right, which is where and then let me take created date time, which should be of type date and time, and I don't want it to be null. Now whatever you feel can be null, you can actually provide. Now these are the columns you are providing, right? So where initially when you create a table and all, you provide columns so that in that table you can provide multiple rows as your data. So among all these, right, so let's build some relations or default. Now let me create data. Now you can see this is a window which will give you a column properties here. Now here I will select create date time, right? Either type date time, and let's say if you want the current system time to be saved, which is a default value. In your properties you have that. Now you can see here in your general you have this. Now you can actually, if you don't like this view of property showing, you can always sort. Now there are two different views, a categorized view and the alphabetical view. Right? We normally keep the alpha category because it will actually all the properties will be grouped under different categories. So in my create date time, I want a default value. So here you can bind default value. What is default value? I would say get date, and this is the inbuilt method in SQL Server which we have. And you get date. If you don't provide this create date time, it will automatically take get date, which is if you consider the local system's date time, and it will save in itself. This is your date. Okay. Now let's go to the roll number. Now here, let's say I want to make it primary key, because primary key is something which maintains a uniqueness for different records in your table, and also which is also used to build relations with different tables you have. Now how can I do it as a primary key? Right click on it and say separate. Okay. Now here the roll number is a primary. And also let's say this roll number is an integer, right? So as soon as I add student, let's say I want it to grow the roll number, auto increment from 1, 2, 3 and so on. Right? Again for that we can come to your properties as such. So in your properties window you have something called identity specification. Now is it identity? It is saying, I would say yes. And you can see the identity increment. Now what is that? You want to increment your data by. I want to increment each and every time I add a record, I want to increment by 1. And what is C, which is like what will be the starting value? Let's say 1, because I want to start from 1. Right? Now you have actually kept your identity specification and your primary key set for this. Now your table is ready. Now let's save this table. So here you can have a save option. Click on this save table. Now let's say this table is students table. Right, the table name is students. Click on. Right, so this table will be created. Here you can right click and refresh that. You can see students table. If you want, you can close this, right? And if you want to get back to design view, right click on this and say design. Right? Right? Same way, if you want to see what data is it, let's open up a query window. Okay? If you want to see what exactly is the data, now I hope you have some SQL knowledge. Set star from table. What is the table? Let's say your table is students. If you drag and drop, right, it will actually remove the table. It will actually name those already. Now you can see here we have all the columns: roll number, student name, student email, student parent name, and create date time, and you don't have any rows as of now. Either you can query this way or right click on this. If you want to quickly see some data, you can say select top 100 rows. Right? Now you have to insert data into it, right? You have we can write an insert query, right? Insert what I'll do, I'll show you the quick way how you can actually create insert query. Right click on this we have something called script table as, and here you can see there are different operations which you can do. You can select or insert or update or delete. So let's say I am more interested on set query. So I click that. Now what it will do is it will just create a query for us. Now this is a template query it will create. Now insert into table. Now this is the format which you use. If I want to insert any data to table, now use insert into source of table, and what are all the columns I will be providing. Now you can see it will automatically take student name, email and all. Why it is not taking roll number? You see there is also a roll number over here, right? But why it is not taking? Because roll number is a unique identity column which will be which have got an auto increment set on. That is the reason why it is not considering. Now what will happen to that? As soon as you add a record, right, your roll number will start incrementing from your seed. Right? So also here you can see there is an option of create date time, right? Now either you can provide create date time, or if you remove this create date time as such, then what happens? Then you are obviously you have a create date time which is defaulted to get date time. It will take your local system's date time and save. Now remove. Same thing, remove your own values. Now your query is ready. Now here, what is this use school and go? Now this is nothing but your database you are saying. Now you can see there are so many databases at college, office, my office and blah blah. There are so many databases, right? Now I want to write a query. Now in which database it should go, right? In which database and in which table it should go. So for that, before writing any query, always say use some database and go. Right? See here, this is a combo box where you can see what is the active database I am using. Now you can see it says school is a database which I am using now. You may have many other databases. Whatever database you can see here, let's say I select college. Right? Now my active database which I will be using is college. Now when I run this query, right, it will try to find this table in college. Right? So that is the reason why whenever before running a query, if you say use a source of database, it will automatically change it and then it will run the query. Let me run this part. So in SQL Server, this is a management studio which you have, right? Management studio is like an editor to access your databases and run different queries or create different objects. Right? Now here I will select this, right? Just select it and we have this view. Now you can see your school will get changed. Right? Anyway, this is a simple part here. Now let's concentrate on insert query. Now you have insert into student name, email and all, right? So let's insert it. Let's say you have a student name, let me give Sam student name and student email you want. Let's say we have sam@abc.com and then you have student their name. Let's call it something. Right? So here we gave simple data to student name, email. So let's run this code. Now you can see here even now when I execute my select query, I don't have any rows. Right? Now let me execute this. Now you can see one row affected. Go back and select it. Now you can see one row got added to your database. Now you can see your roll number got seed value 1 first. And your create data also you can see we are not providing any roll number or create data. You can see here, right? But they have got a create data now got a defaulted date time and you have a roll number. Now you have your data. Fine. Same way continue you are doing this. Let's say some other guy is a and his father is a value and execution. Right. Come back, we have roll number implemented. You can see it will increment number 1 and you have your data ready, right? And your create data. Right? Here you create data, you can see that there is a difference in seconds or minutes as such. Yeah. Now you have your database ready, your table ready, right? And you have things ready to go now. Now, which is like Now we can actually connect to the server, right? And we can actually try to get the data. Now let's go to our coding part and let me create a new project. Now we are going to write all the radio different operations in this. Let me call it as some radio net project. So here let's see how to connect to database now. Now as I said, we can actually follow the same patterns you are going to use. Right? Let's say I want to connect to my SQL Server database because this is my SQL Server database and I want to query a table in my SQL Server database in school database, right? To my code. Now first step is loading a driver. Now how can I load driver? Now you can actually import your system.data where all namespaces are different things related to radio will be exposed, and let's say specific to SQL Server, I'm gonna use SQL client. Right. Now when I use this right now, my driver is ready. I mean, I can actually use a driver in my program to connect to database. Now let's write some exception handling first. So let's write console right there now. Let's say exception. Right? And I'm writing some message. Right. Now let's start with the steps now. So after loading driver, we have get connection, right? Now which means we have to connect to our database before starting communication. Now how can I connect? In get connection, you have few things to actually work on. Now whenever you want to get connection, right, you should know few details about database to actually connect. Right? Anyways, we know that for connecting a database, we have a class called connection. Now this is a common class. In case of SQL Server connection, we will be using SQL connection. So for that, we need to have something called connection string. Now this connection string will have different components like what is the data or what is a server, right? What is database, server or something we normally call as a host. What is database? What are credentials, right? We need all the details, right, to connect to database. So now here my server and host is my local machine. Now you can see this is my name of a machine. Let's say this is my name, which I am using now. This is a name, right? The name of my server. And it says what is the database. Our database or sometimes we normally call initial catalog. Right, this is a database. So here the initial catalog is a database which is school. And here we can see it is seeking for the credentials. Obviously to connect to database, right, it won't give an open access to databases. It needs the connections. Right now here you can actually create, if you want, you can create a SQL credentials here. Now this is something which is important for authentications. Now this is for security purpose which you have, right? Because you need a authentication process to give access to database, right? And we normally go for credentials. And in authentication in SQL Server, which is Microsoft SQL Server, you have two different types of authentications. One, you have Windows authentication and your SQL authentication. Right? You can actually create both the type of authentications you want. You can have a hybrid authentication, both Windows and SQL. Now, Windows authentication is the one, let's say, whatever your NT user you have, which is networking, or let's say Windows user. or to be more specific, like you will be using some username to log into your machine, right? Your laptop. That is your NT user ID in RSA. Or if you are working somewhere, so they will actually provide an employee ID or some username or something to log into your machines. That is something which is your networking ID. Now using that networking ID itself, directly you can talk to or connect to a SQL server. That type of authentication is your Windows authentication. Whereas your SQL authentication is specific SQL user will be created in your SQL server to connect to. Right? So here for both you have something called security folder here where you can open, and you have something called logins. Right? So logins, yes, you already have logins. Now you can see there are different logins which you already have. Now if you want to create, you can right click and create a new login. Now you can see there are two different authentication types here, Windows authentication and SQL. Now you can see when you click on Windows authentication, it is giving, it is disabling password, right? Because whatever password you are using for your, Windows NT ID, same password you can actually use to log in, right? So whereas SQL authentication, you have to create a user and provide your, create your password. Now this is your authentication. But anyways, my server over here is a Windows authenticated one, right? So I can use this directly using Windows authentication. So that is something which we normally also call as integrated security to build our right. So these are the main things you have mainly to actually create a connection string. So once your connection string is ready, then I can use the connection class to connect to database. Now the first step we understood to create a connection string. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me create a connection, let's say string. You have one more option to create a connection string in your configuration file. So configuration file part we'll see tomorrow, right? So here, now let's build the connection string. The first one which we have is server or host, or sometimes you can also call it as data source, right? Now let's create data source is equal to, now I have to give the data source or data or my server name. So let me just copy this, go back and just use my server name, and then your semicolon to actually give another property. So another property is I have to provide my database name, right? After that, which is my initial catalog. Let's go ahead here and say initial, we have to catalog, and you have to provide your database name, which is your school in the database. And after that, the credentials part. Now, what credentials I can use to log into this database? Now, that is something which is we have integrated security. And now, as I'm using my Windows authentication, you can say SSPI, right? Which is my integrated security. Now, here for this, you can say @ right? So that it will take all the sequences as a straightforward string here. So this is your connection string. Basically, you don't have to remember the data source, initial catalog and all. Once you start working on it, you will memorize. Or there is one more way how we can actually use this, build this connection string easily through our configuration file. I'll show you that part. Now, once the connection string is ready, now we are good to go to at least create a connection. Right, now let's see how to create a connection. As I said, you have a class called SQL connection. Now this is a class which I can use to connect to database. Fine, so let me call it as con is equal to new. You can see SQL connection needs a connection string, right? Or you can create a connection first and then provide a connection string, right? So let's provide the connection string which we have already created. I am providing this connection string as an input to connection. Now once your class is ready, then you can say con, which is your object of session connection, and say open. This will open the database connection using these parameters directly, right? To check whether it is connected or not, let's say if the con dot, we have something called state, right? Now you have so many states, right? Let's say you want to check whether your connection is open or not state, right? If it is open, then let's print console.writeLine of, let's say, connection successful, right? Else connection failed. So we are just checking whether the connection is successful or not. So we are in step 2, and we have loaded the driver and we have created the connection string, and we are step 2 of connecting, where we are actually connecting the device. Now after this, let's say, let's play. After this cache, let me write a read key so that I can play console wait. Now your real connection part, your code is done. So let's run this program. So before that, let me make it a startup project. Save this and run this. You can see connection successful, right? Which means now your code is connected to database now, right? And you can start working on writing queries and getting data set. Now, so here you can see I have opened the connection. Whenever you open connection to database or anything, what is important? Right? It's very important to close connection because database connections are valuable, right? One connection to database is costly again, right? So always we should make sure that whenever you are creating your connection open, right, make sure you are actually disposing that connection or closing that connection. Otherwise that connection will stay until your application is clear. Click on that, right? Now let's first close the connection. So let's close the connection again. Whenever you are working on connection string again, we have to do the find, right? Whatever happens in between the program, right? Your connection to database should always be killed. So this part we have already seen in files, right? Same pattern you can follow here. I'll check if my con object is not equal to null, and then I'll have something called close, a direct option to close the connection. Right? So even if any exception happens or not, right? Your connection, we are making sure that our database connection is being closed for sure. Right? So here, if you want, you can write it down. So we have console.writeLine of connection closed successfully. Fine. This is what we have. Now let's run this. So you can see it opened the connection and then it closed the connection, which means our connection with the SQL Server is successful, and then we closed it after checking the connection. Now here it's very important to make sure that your connection string is correct. Let's say if you miss something, let's say I'm just missing some spelling here. Now run this. See? right? It says your keyword doesn't support initial kind of so and so, which means you have to be, clear on the key and the values you are providing, right? The key should be understandable by your consistency class and also your values, and a key and a value, right? So these are consistency, and this is how we normally connect to database. So now, how to create a query, run it, and handle the result set, we'll see it in our tomorrow's class.